Hello and welcome to episode 87 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, I get greenwashed and I plan to fight back. What it would take for countries to meet the Paris targets with existing tech. Is wind turbine syndrome a real thing? And a look back at the first week of COP26. All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. I've got a bee in my bonnet, Brian. How are you? You're okay?
I'm good. Tell me about this bee. I'm dying to know.
Well, we'll get to the bees. We'll get to the bees. But the first question should be, why am I wearing a bonnet? But here we are.
You know that people don't use that term bee in a bonnet anymore, right?
No. I'm appealing to our octogenarian crowd.
Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to give you an update on, so last week I said I was thinking about disconnecting and deleting my Facebook and my Instagram over their ongoing evilness. So after kind of announcing that, then I kind of spent the week, I was still looking at it. I was still using both. But, you know, you look at it with a different lens. Like you sort of think about, okay, well, what am I actually getting from this? And yeah, the result is that most of it I don't need. It's true. Most of what's on there I don't need. But I would miss the local EV groups. So I think
that's a tough
Facebook largely for me, it's kind of like an old-fashioned bulletin board at this point. Like, you know, in the early days of the internet, it's, you know, just a way to connect with people and ask questions. And people still do occasionally, friends of ours post interesting stuff. Like our friend Tom posted these photos in the story about he met one of the NASA astronauts a few years ago. And I always love kind of reading and seeing stories like that from our friends. And, you know, that's why I hadn't sort of canceled it up until now. So I still think I'm going to do it, but I don't know. I may need you to kind of check in on the EV news groups or something and tell me what I'm missing.
Well, you know, there's all kinds of things. I check it. That's basically all I have anymore is the EV groups, because people have stopped posting, or at least Facebook has decided not to show me stuff.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see Tom's post.
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't shown to me. I think people aren't showing my posts anymore either. A lot of people don't see my posts. So
and I've got quite good at curating my feed over the years. So like if somebody posts a lot of ranty kind of stuff, I just unfollow them and you don't see it. So, you know, you can do a good job of curating it so it's not so horrible. But yeah, I don't know. Look for that post from Tom. It was pretty fascinating.
Okay. Well, Brian, I was surprised and shocked. As November just gets underway, tomorrow morning I will set a November solar record for my rooftop solar here. And that's going to be, what, the 9th?
Yeah, I don't usually produce much solar in November, but I noticed the same thing about my system as well, like just a week into the month, and it's already looking like a record November.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I guess November is just always cloudy here because that's what the prediction was.
Yeah.
But November is always in my chart. It's the same as December, which should be very dark because that's when your days get really short and the snow starts to come and cover your panels from time to time. So it's quite interesting that I guess we've had a sunny and a nice one. It's been fairly warm, if you can call it warm. Anyway, we've got a YouTube video of all things taking off. You know how I'm always complaining that we don't get any views on YouTube, and then we're over on the TikTok now, making hay there.
The algorithm heard you saying how much better TikTok was.
I feel like it did, Brian. I feel like it did because suddenly we have one with like 250,000 views over there. That's unheard of. And I was getting kind of down about all the negative comments. So the video is about driving an electric car in winter. And there's a lot of negative Nellies who just say, no, that's not right. Your 9-year-old car that you're driving it happily is not true. It's not true. It's a lie. You're going to get electrocuted or, ridiculous crap like that. And I don't have the right personality type because I get set off. My heart starts pounding fast and I start getting ticked off quickly at something like that. I feel threatened by it. Mm-hmm. So I've been on the Facebook group of EV owners, and they're going to take care of it for me.
Yeah, there's people that enjoy that, arguing with other people on the internet.
I can't do it. You and I, we don't have the right personality for it. We're podcasters by nature. We get too upset at these things. But
I like the one-way communication. We talk, people listen.
And that's the way it should be.
Yes, damn it.
So listen, I don't know. Sometimes I try to engage them and not, be sarcastic or anything, but I can't help myself usually.
Well, I've always kind of wondered, on the Jimmy Kimmel show, sometimes he does that mean tweets thing where he has celebrities on and they read these horrible tweets that people have said about them. And it's hilarious. And the celebrities love it too. And I always kind of wondered, why is that? It's like if you put it in that context of you're on like a national TV show reading these horrible things, it's like, I don't know, like it's like the celebrities have already won by being on television, and I think that's kind of how I felt when you collected all the mean comments from the Detail Geek video of cleaning my car when my Tesla was on there. You collected all those negative comments, and I found it hilarious. And I thought, well, I guess that's because I won. I'm the guy with the Tesla, so I guess I won.
Remember when I used to give talks to your film classes about my YouTube experience in the past? I remember one year pulling up, because they used to have like a mail function on YouTube where you could send private messages. So I went into that and I started reading the private messages, because the private messages were the really bad ones. The comments were nothing. The private messages tried to get me. They tried to make me commit suicide practically. They were attacking every bit of my physicality and had made up this idea that I had never had a girlfriend and I was a father of children at the time and all this stuff. And I remember reading them to your class and we all had a good laugh and I felt like I won. So, but then I wanted to go find those again and I can't find them because they've just eliminated them all. They're all gone.
Oh yeah.
So, I had millions and millions of views on a couple of YouTube channels for comedy, and the people did not like that. They felt that they had to they wanted to make sure I saw the message. So they sent it to me directly. Humankind is garbage, Brian, and we'll get into more of that in a second. I wanted to mention that Hertz, the Hertz deal that we talked about last week, that's a bit fuzzy now, isn't it? I mean, apparently the ink hasn't dried or been even spilled yet.
Yeah, well, what it sounds like is, Elon Musk was tweeting because, of course, the stock price was just going insanely high after that. And he was sort of questioning, well, why is the stock price going high? Because we already have more demand than we can meet with production. So why, another order doesn't really make a difference to the bottom line of the company. But then he also added, and also the deal hasn't been signed or something like that. So what it sounds like is that Hertz is essentially ordering the vehicles like any other person would order the vehicles. So they haven't drawn up some massive contract where they're buying all 100,000. They're ordering them, and it sounds like they're basically in line with all the other customers. So, whether they need a secure deal or not, they still intend, it sounds like, to buy 100,000 vehicles. They're just kind of not doing it through a corporate deal. They're just ordering the cars like anyone else, it sounds like, anyway.
So what I found it interesting, I read about that the business plan of car rental companies is actually to buy a whole lot of cars at a discount. You negotiate a discount with, say, Ford or whoever, and like a significant discount. Thousands and thousands of dollars because you're ordering so many cars. And then when the time passes or the mileage adds up, that they get to the point where they think they can sell the car for that price, they sell it.
Oh, I see.
And they end up spending really no money on it. Now, I don't know how long that is. It could be 3 months. It could be 3 years. I don't know. It's probably somewhere in between. But that's their business plan. But with Tesla, they're not going to be having any discount whatsoever. Nothing. Zero. Zip. In fact, if anything, the demand has made the price go up lately.
And that was, made clear that they are paying full retail price for the cars, which is, unheard of in the car rental industry. And there was a earnings call from another of the rental car companies. I forget which one, Budget or something, but I don't know. They sort of implied that Hertz had beat them to it. And it sounds like other car rental companies are kind of planning the same move. But it's going to be a problem because Tesla's the only one making electric cars at scale. And, they already can't meet demand, and Hertz is already ahead of them, sort of, with 100,000 orders. But, the Texas plant and the Berlin plant are going to be coming online soon. So the amount of Teslas available should start to improve soon.
I saw you took your car for a car wash, pre-winter car wash, your Model 3 Standard Range Plus. How did that go?
Yeah, no, I wanted to mention that just because it was the first time I had used car wash mode, which is a recent update to the software. Yeah, car wash mode is now a thing in the Tesla. And you just, before you go in the car wash, you put it in car wash mode and it makes sure that all the windows stay up and they're locked and everything. And it stops the wipers from going off, which might happen if the automatic wipers are on. Now, is
this a human being car wash or an automatic one?
It's an automatic car wash, and it's the kind where you inch the car forward yourself. It's not a conveyor belt one. Yeah.
Really?
So what I would actually like, so, you know, the car, you still have to inch the car forward yourself. And as you drive in, it jets water at you. And then as you drive out, it blasts the dryers at you. So you kind of have to drive as slow as possible to sort of get the max benefit. What I would love is if car wash mode included a creep function where it creeped at the absolute slowest speed, because it's hard to kind of press the pedal like at the right kind of thing. But if you go to a car wash that has a conveyor belt type thing that pulls the car through, then there's also a button on car wash mode, free roll. And then once you get on the conveyor belt, you hit free roll and the car just is pulled forward. So you don't have to put it into neutral.
Oh, I see. Okay. I'm always struggling to get my car into neutral at car washes. Well, Brian, it's time to get serious because I've got some serious things to talk about now.
Okay.
In fact, I don't think we've ever gotten more serious on the show. I had a relative stay with me on the weekend overnight. This relative is a middle person in the oil industry, I would say. So worked his whole life, came from a poor family in Saskatchewan, went to Alberta, and made it in oil. Yeah. And got a little bit of education and went into the oil industry, did well, was a manager, supervisor, in charge of people, made lots of money, probably has several $1 million in the bank. And he's approaching retirement age. And, I'm related to him and I want to say that I love him and love his family, but I have some serious problems with very little things that came out during that time. And I wanted to talk to you about it because it seemed like every time he picked up the phone, he would say, do you know what Trudeau did now to his oil buddies?
Yeah.
So it was all Trudeau this, Trudeau that.
Yeah.
And I talked with my son and I said, is Trudeau the boogeyman for a changing world? Because he's our prime minister, by the way. I know most people aren't from Canada who are listening to this. But he's kind of they call him a feminist, although some people argue that. He's certainly a modern person. He's not a man's man. He's somewhat intellectual and somewhat, and he's been pushing on the environment. And he bought a pipeline, which pisses people like you and I off.
Yeah.
But he did that to appease the industry. And my wife pointed that out to him and he said, that was just to appease them. And it was BS. He also closed 3 other pipelines.
Yeah.
This is the reality of where it's at. And I don't think that he has, we've often speculated on the show, well, what are the oil companies thinking? What are they thinking of? Do they know what's going on? They don't. They don't know a fucking thing. They don't have any idea. They have no idea. The closest thing they have to an idea is that Trudeau is nefariously shutting down the oil because he doesn't like oil.
Yeah. So there's no vision beyond what's happening in our province and in our country.
No, they don't know what's going on. I doubt that he's ever touched an electric car. I mean, it's if he's watched TV, you can't see nothing but electric car commercials. Listen, I'm amazed by it.
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing to bring into this, which is difficult to talk about, but I think it's pertinent to this, so I'm going to bring it up. It involves, he said he was driving out east in Ontario, and usually when you drive out east, you go through, it's actually shorter to go into the United States for a while.
Yeah.
And this is a person who's always had lots of money for decades and has traveled the world, but he didn't want to go into the United States. And he didn't say why. He said, but certain groups down there are not, I don't feel safe. I'm not ready. And my sister-in-law kept asking him, my sister-in-law from Regina kept asking him, who are these groups? Who are these groups? And finally, I was thinking to her, shut up, I don't want to know. But I didn't really believe that it was going to be so bad. And it was, well, they're certainly not white people who are causing trouble. And
this is supposed to be a fun show, James.
I know. But the point is, he, this also ties into Facebook because he is completely computer illiterate and is not the type of person to be on Facebook. And yet he recently found himself on Facebook. And as a result, he said that there's protesters at the Capitol who are getting prosecuted, and they're not prosecuting the Black Lives Matter people. So he's bought into this myth. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I can't get past some of this crap. Like, I can't get past how you call the Capitol rioters protesters in any way when you're literally killing people and smearing feces on the wall of your government. And I can't get past the racism part. But what fascinates me, and I've always known he was a racist. Everybody in Alberta is a racist. It's always come up. You can't. Every time I step foot in that damn province, people are happy to talk about how racist they are, and they usually do it with a joke, or the statement, "I'm not racist, but," and then I just fall into my soul. And so he's basically scared to go to the United States. This is a man who's traveled the world, who now thinks it's not safe because he's bought into myths about Black Lives Matter, which I've not been exposed to. I don't even know what those myths are. I've only peripherally heard about them like about a year ago, but I imagine they're all over the place in his corner of the woods. And I also Brian, I think that the world is changing because oil is going away. White supremacy is going away. Male supremacy is going away, and people cannot frickin' handle it.
It's the last gasp of all those things.
Yeah. And Trudeau just won the government. He just won the election.
Yeah.
A minority government, as we have in our parliamentary system here. Why don't you blame the people? Why do you blame? We knew what his policies were. I didn't vote for him, but people did, and they knew what his policies were. And his policies were pro-environment. And you and I probably think that he's quite soft on the environment and should be doing a hell of a lot more. The fact is, he's doing probably as little as he possibly can in this day and age. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But if that's how because this is a constant theme of mine, how is the oil and gas industry responding to what you and I cover every week on this show? The answer is they're not getting it. So what's going to happen? I don't know. More talk of separatism from provinces from the country and gosh knows what, political unrest. What do you think?
The flood of misinformation, you'd think that we'd be in a better position now with the internet because there's more access to information than we've ever had before. But if there's no regulation to stop, misinformation and brainwashing of people, back in the old days, people would read the same newspapers, they'd read the same television, and sure, that wasn't always ideal either. But at least, it got us all generally on the same page as to what reality is.
This is not a stupid man. And he's not happy. Not happy.
And he should be happy because he's about to retire and he's done very well.
Well, he wants to keep going. He'd like to work, a third of the year or something. That would make him happy. Just to keep the money flowing and be comfortable that way and not have to worry about money.
Yeah. It's
just you and I, Brian. We're here in the oil-rich capital of Canada, trying to make things, trying to warn people that the world is changing, and all you have to do is pick up a freaking newspaper. That's all you have to do. But if you don't believe newspapers, then you're in La La Land. What's going to happen? You're going to be left behind.
Well, good thing I'm here in my bomb shelter. That's all I can say.
Yes, I envy your bomb shelter, but it brings us back to Facebook, and the moral of the story is, I'm even madder than ever at Facebook. It's come close to home. A relative of mine is radicalized, and not just, I don't expect him to become unracist, but to become batshit crazy and believe stuff and to stop going to the United States, even though he's traveled completely around the world, is ridiculous. But we better get on with the show here. So the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow has got underway. Do you say Glasgow or Glasgow? Because Barack Obama was saying Glasgow, and I want to say
Glasgow.
it right.
I think Glasgow.
Here in Glasgow.
How could Barack Obama, a learned man, former president of the United States, 2 terms, get it wrong then? In Glasgow or Glasgow? You know, people, you could always email us. Never let anything get by us. Always email us. Let us know what's going on.
I know that Moscow is Moscow, not Moscow.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, the Energy Gang podcast was talking about week 1, and they are experts. So I just wanted to pull a 50-second clip from their podcast and talk about what the summary of last week was.
We had a new international agreement on forestry that looks pretty significant. More than 100 countries getting together to agree to preserve forests. And we've also had some big new commitments on reaching net zero emissions. Over the past year or so, we've seen a number of economies, the EU, Canada, Japan, South Korea, committing to net zero emissions by 2050. We've had China committing to net zero by 2060. And now just this week, we've also had India committing to net zero emissions by 2070. We've had Vietnam making a pledge for 2050 and so on. So there seems to be now an enormous amount of momentum behind these net zero pledges. And in fact, if you add it all up, roughly 85% of all the world's emissions are now produced by countries that have signed up to some kind of net zero pledge by roughly the middle of the century.
They say it depends who you talk to if it's been a success or not. Some people see it as successful. Some people say it as a failure. I mean, you can argue that it's an abject failure because they are not living up to what they need to do, but they've also made a lot of progress on things. What do you think?
Well, it's just so incredibly difficult to get an entire planet of 7 or 8 billion people on the same page and acting together. I mean, these are just so many countries. It's so many governments. Everybody has to go back home and they have their own problems to deal with and their own politics in their own country. So, I'm always disappointed when these things move slowly and don't move more dramatically, but I'm also not surprised by it.
I've said last week, and I'll say it again, I want to repeat it, it bears repeating, that we need action now. It's great to say we're zero at 2050, but what we do between now, especially this decade, and as I've said, that, the economics will be unstoppable in the next decade for clean energy. It's already in many parts of the world the cheapest thing, but it's going to completely disrupt things on its own next decade. But we need right now, this decade, to do some hard work, spend the hard money, because if we delay, it's going to have 3 times the emissions. Even if we are at zero in 2050 or close to it, it'll be 3 times the emissions in the atmosphere if we're not acting sooner than later.
Yeah. And, we still have governments and jurisdictions approving new fossil fuel projects, which should not be a thing in 2021. At the very least, stop. And then we worry about heading downwards.
Yeah. So oil and gas was not invited, but they were still there. Is that right?
Yeah. I just wanted to mention that because we had, I think, talked about that on last week's show, that it was sort of made a big deal out of the fact that the oil and gas companies were not invited as sort of our official participants, but turns out they can still go. And the BBC had a report that, they figured out that 503 people from the oil and gas industry are delegates at the conference. And so I guess so far they haven't stopped them from attending, but I think, that's the next step.
Well, they're probably plotting,
Clearly, and there's lobbyists involved with every government on Earth. So, they're going to be there at COP26 saying hello to all of the government officials that they lobby back home and kind of continuing these relationships. So it's a bit of a sad state of affairs.
They're pushing to have to stop the bailout, right? To stop bailouts of fossil fuels. I understand Canada has made some progress on that a lot of the subsidies have gone away. But what do you think?
Yeah, well, I wanted to mention an article that Tony Seba wrote that actually just came out today. So Tony Seba from Rethink X, who we often talk about on the show, who has been, predicting the end of fossil fuels just based on economics. So yeah, he's got a new article out today. The fastest route to net zero is not a carbon tax. It's ending the $6 trillion a year fossil fuel bailout. So yeah, he's calling it a bailout, and we should all start calling it a bailout because that's what it is. Like, this is a mature industry that's been around for 100 years. Why does it have any subsidies at all? Like, this just doesn't make any kind of sense. And so his argument is that we don't actually need a carbon tax. And it was something that, you know, I was giving Trudeau credit for. There is actually a carbon tax in Canada, and it's going to be increasing, and other governments have not been able to implement a carbon tax. So I kind of thought, well, we're ahead on that front. But of course, if we're still subsidizing, if the Canadian government is still subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, then the carbon tax doesn't really make sense. It's, you know, you're still kind of doing it both ways. So yeah, his argument is that we don't need a carbon tax. We just need to stop this ridiculous $11 million a minute that we talked about on the show not too long ago. That's how big the subsidy is for fossil fuel. So if that industry was just paying their fair share and, you know, paying for the pollution that they're causing, that would be enough because the clean stuff is already cheaper in most cases.
It is. And I just wish that our premier, our government officials, our utility company executives would put solar panels on their roof. Not to prove anything, but to prove something to themselves. I think one of the reasons you and I know that this stuff can work, I mean, with absolute certainty, is because we've had solar panels on our roof for 3 or 4 years or 5 years for you, or something like that. You're approaching your 5th year. We know how it works. We look at it on our smartphone, and we can see the graphs and everything it's done today and yesterday and last year and last month. We know exactly when it works, when it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work is at night. And that's it.
And Tony Seba's other main point from this article is to allow people to do that. So there's sort of two things: stop the fossil fuel subsidy, and then open up the market so people can put solar panels on their roofs. Now, you and I got in under the old program where the meter just runs forwards or backwards. They've since ruined that program and reduced by half the credit that you get when you put power back into the grid. So the other key point here is you've got to make it easy for people to make their own power, to trade power, open up the grid. Here in Canada, we often have these government-owned monopolies as utilities. That's got to go away. It's got to be a free market thing, and it will all take care of itself.
Well, is that all you have to say? Because it segues into my next segment.
Let's do it.
Today, I was served an ad by SaskPower. That is our government, a crown corporation, we call it, because it is a government corporation. And it was a good thing, Brian, was it not, when they made SaskPower? Because we live in a vast province, a rural province of farmers, a long time ago when electricity was coming around, and it was very expensive. So the government subsidized putting power to everybody's farm and every town, right? That's how it worked. Am I wrong?
It was a huge deal in our province. The electrification of our province was a huge, huge deal at the time that really, opened things up for prosperity.
And they did the same with telephones, right? SaskTel, the cell phones. And there's been a threat for the last 20, 25 years from right-wing governments that want to get rid of crown corporations. We have that with our auto insurance too, and it works out fairly well. And the telephone company works out well too, because they have we have little cell phone competition in Canada, so that keeps our cell phone bills significantly lower than other places.
Yeah, we have the last government-owned provincial phone utility in the province, but yeah, it's a good thing because it adds one more player. So there's a bit more competition here than there is in other places. So
my cackles have always gotten up when we talk about, privatizing crown corporations. And really, when it comes to healthcare, because that's, what we really love about Canada is our healthcare. So that's the problem too, the threat of that. But now I've completely, as a left-wing person, come around and said, no, what we need now is to privatize our SaskPower grid. Because they are dipshits. They are total effing dipshits. And the government is making them stupider. And they're in charge of our energy. And what the problem is that they're not doing anything. And what they want to do is the ad I got served was about small modular nuclear reactors. So let's get into that, shall we? Let's get into that, Brian.
Watch your blood pressure.
They don't exist. You can't go to Walmart and buy one. Okay? You can't. Can you go to Walmart and buy a solar panel and a wind turbine? You actually can. Those exist. They've existed for a while, and they're freaking cheap. And they're getting cheaper. And you can see how much they're going to be cheaper in 5 years, in 10 years. They're already the cheapest source of energy in the world. People say, but the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. Yeah, there's batteries for that. There's different kinds of storage, which exist now. You can go buy a battery. I used to buy them when I was a kid, put them in my cars. And my flashlights, batteries exist. You can do it for the grid, believe it or not. And people are doing that. And the price on that is coming down even faster because it's relatively new for that sort of scale. And SMRs, the Sierra Club of Canada, is against nuclear, basically. Okay. Now I've come out and said that I'm okay with nuclear as far if we need to save our freaking planet, humanity. We don't need to save the planet. We need to save humanity, human life on the planet. I'm okay with that, but I don't think it's in any way necessary or the most economical way to do it. So why would you do it? Why would you do it? And can you imagine, by the way, and I wanted to say this, if solar and wind were getting subsidies 100 years from now? Can you freaking imagine that? 100 years from now, green power getting subsidies like oil is 100 years after they started? Hit me with a bat. Hit me with a bat right now. It's indescribable. I just can't get over it. So the Sierra Club, this is their views. It's more expensive than any other option on the table. And it's always the assumption. There's always the assumption that green power doesn't work. There's always the assumption that electric cars don't work. We've been driving electric cars for years. Best thing out there. Winter, summer, it doesn't matter. And it's the most expensive option. They don't exist yet. Might they exist in 10 years? The province of New Brunswick is trying to get one going. Maybe in the 2030s. Again, maybe not. A lot of the times it takes an enormous amount of cement for these things, which is not ideal for the environment. There's 100 different SMR designs, and in order for it to become even close to economical, they would have to settle on one design from one company and make thousands of them in a mass manufacturing process.
And I do have some sympathy and some empathy because I think not everybody involved in this is disingenuous. I mean, I think there are many people that believe that this answer is necessary. But, most people are not listening to Tony Seba. And they just don't know. And I think it will become clear at some point. But who knows when.
So one of the projects, there's only one in the West and it's not even built yet. It's $1 billion and 15 years late. This is not what you need. What you need is something you can go get now. Come to my house. Go to the hardware store and buy a solar panel. When I was a kid, there was a solar panel in my calculator.
Yeah.
And I'm old. So they've been around.
We have one of those solar calculators in our house, and it finally stopped working like just last week. It was one of those Texas Instruments ones with the solar panel, and something happened with the display now, and it just stopped working like last week.
Well, the sun is going to show up every day. It's going to burn in the sky. If it doesn't, we got bigger problems, okay? So, you mix in some wind, and there becomes a recipe for having the cheapest, wind, solar, and storage. And, I'm open to the idea that we're going to have a lot of excess because our winter and summer solar vary greatly, that we'll have to overbuild our solar and have excess in the summer. Well, sure, we can make some green hydrogen. But you know what? Green hydrogen doesn't exist yet either. They still haven't solved the problem of green hydrogen and having it exist at a competitive price. So let's just sit around and wait for this stuff. No, we have to act now, right now. And we can, but we're not, because governments like ours are tossing out the idea and greenwashing to get more fossil fuels and make the last buck you possibly can for their buddies on the golf course. And it drives me crazy. Companies will not fund these nuclear reactors, so governments have to. So it comes out of our pocket. And it just, these companies, they lobby and they get money from the government, and it's boondoggles and carbon capture. Did you read about carbon capture in Saskatchewan? It's not doing well. We have one of the few carbon capture places in the world. We have it on a coal plant.
Yeah, and it's capturing, but it's never done as much as it's supposed to.
It's like 45%. 45%. It's terrible.
And that would just get it down to the level of natural gas, because I heard that burning natural gas for electricity, it's only about half of what coal is for emitting pollutants, which is still not great. Like, natural gas is cleaner, but it still produces half of the pollution of coal.
As far as greenhouse gases go, right? Because it has a lot of methane involved.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
It's screwing up the world. It's screwing up my kids' lives, Brian. It's these people are monsters.
No, I saw a nice phrase on Twitter. Somebody described it. The fossil fuel industry is essentially shorting humanity.
I'm going to go from laughing to tears because that is so. It's funny because it's true, and the truth is very, very scary. Yeah, University of Regina professor Emily Eaton, a professor of geology and environmental studies, says that the fossil fuel industry is a major polluter and they're not stopping it. And that was one of the many stories. Man, Brian, this show is going to be crazy long. I'm sorry. Right. I hope you weren't planning on eating today. Anyway, I wanted to get that out there, some of the things about SMRs, but also on a positive note, you know how there was the solar farm down by Weyburn that's going up. Our first one came online in Saskatchewan. Our first utility solar farm came online 2 weeks ago. Before that,
yep.
You or I had more solar production going into the grid than our utility in our whole jurisdiction. We're just two guys with a house and a roof and some solar panels. And that's probably one of the reasons why I did it, is because no one else was. The utility wasn't, so I did it. And they finally opened, they had tenders, and they're allowing 10, 13 gigawatt solar farms. Well, the largest solar farm in Canada is now close to getting underway in Alberta, and it is 100 gigawatts. That's 150,000 homes that will power. Now, what I'm fascinated about, Brian, is the fact that this is a tracking and bifacial, just like the one they're doing in Saskatchewan. And I was kind of suspicious of that because that adds a lot of money to the cost of a solar farm, right? Because the tracking means it moves and follows the sun. They physically moves. It's not just a fixed panel, but it moves. Bifacial means that there is solar panels, solar receptors on the back of those panels, so it reflects off the snow or the ground and goes up onto the back part of those panels to add a little bit more energy to them. Not a lot, but a little bit. But again, expensive. And I thought that the solar farm south of us, the one that's going to be opening, I was suspicious of it. But the one in Alberta is doing the same thing, and it is funded by a big international green investment company who knows what they're doing. So I just wonder about this. Do you have any thoughts?
No, and it's a private company that's doing this. So in neighboring Alberta, the grid is more open to like new players. Kind of anybody could come in and start producing solar and sell it to the grid. So, if this is a private company spending their own money doing it and they think that it's a good investment, I'm surprised too, because, all that hardware is really expensive. The tracking hardware, like, it's fantastic technology, But typically, because the panels are not that expensive, it's usually, in the past, made more sense to just put up more fixed panels,
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I guess it's now becoming economical.
Well, I've asked them on Twitter, and I'm hoping they'll get back to me by next show. They may not. I don't know what it'll take to talk to these people because they're probably pretty busy. But I really like to know, is it because of our northern latitude that because in the wintertime, the sun, first of all, the sun is in a different part of the sky in December than it is it's very low. It looks like a setting sun in December here.
Yeah.
Practically. And in the summer, it's almost looks like it's right overhead. So in that sense, seasonally, the sun is in a different part of the sky, but then also, and the idea is that if you point, you need to have the solar panel perpendicular to the sun's angle in the sky, and needs to bounce off it at a right angle, basically, the photons from the sun. So when I had a solar panel for my camper and you could tilt it, you could see the voltage go up and down and find just the right angle with your hand. And I sort of learned about how it worked then. I also learned, and I was quite surprised, that it worked on a cloudy day.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people don't realize, that they work on cloudy days. And it varies. The amount of clouds varies, and there's some that hardly affect the sunshine, and some that a dark rainy day that turns on the streetlights, of course, would have very little solar power. But every day, my panels produce power every single day that's not covered with snow. And for knock on wood, we haven't had that last year. So it's a beautiful thing, just solar, and we know wind work. But anything that moves, Brian, may require maintenance, right? So that's why I was thinking that anything that moves is going to be more expensive and require maintenance, breakdown.
No, and you can imagine after a few years, some of the panels would stop rotating and have to go out and be fixed.
Yeah, because these things last up to 30 years before they're replaced. So at least 20. So that's a long time to be out there in the wind and the environment. The other nice thing, though, is that they will, if it snows in the forecast, they will turn vertical. So you don't have to take the snow off them. Also, and if there's a windstorm, they go flat. So they're not damaged. So that's a good thing. What I don't understand about them, though, is that they're single axis. That means that in order to follow the sun from the east to the west, like they say they do in the article that was on cbc.ca, they would have to be like this, sort of pointing towards the east, and then go flat at noon, and then tilt the other way. Like that's the single axis. So the single axis, I don't see how it's anything other than flat. So you're throwing away some electricity if you're not perpendicular to the sun at the best time of the day. And I have so many questions, Brian.
Well, maybe we can do a field trip.
Maybe we should do a field trip. We've talked about that, but COVID has sort of scared us out of it. But you've got a Tesla. We can go anywhere now. All the superchargers are open. We've got so many options.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
I saw a pickup truck with a propeller as a trailer hitch plug. When the trailer hitch isn't on, they sort of have a little trailer hitch on a little square. And it was a metal propeller as if it went into water. I was laughing at that. That's a good joke. Much better than truck nuts or anything like that. So, yeah. So this Alberta solar farm, it's got a 1.3 million panels. It covers 5 square miles, and Amazon is buying all the power. And this is the deal why I propose that SaskPower, our utility, become privatized, because it is less regulated in Alberta, and people can do that. A company can say, I want to buy a bunch of power, and I want these guys to set up a wind farm to serve me. And Amazon, big company, doing it. And a lot of companies want to do that.
And they want clean power. They're not going to buy the dirty kind.
And more companies are getting on board with that. So, I just wanted to mention that. We'll have more on that on future shows.
All right, so there's a story out of France reported in The Guardian that a French couple has won a lawsuit about wind turbine syndrome. So This is a thing that arguably does not exist, but they did win this lawsuit. So they complained that they had various health issues because there were these wind turbines very close to their house. And what happened too is that there was a stand of trees between them and the turbines. And at some point, the trees got cut down. And so the turbines became louder, they became more noticeable. There was flashing lights on the turbines. So they claimed that they had headaches, insomnia, heart irregularities, depression, dizziness, tinnitus, nausea for more than 2 years.
Yeah,
and they
I have
say
all
they
those
moved
things.
away. Yeah, sure.
But
we
then
all
I have a
that.
fan in my bedroom, so who can say?
But, and then they moved away and they say all these symptoms go away. So yeah, they did win this lawsuit, but it still remains really kind of an unproven thing. So it's possible this will be used as a precedent for other lawsuits about similar ideas about wind turbines. I mean, I'm sure it could be annoying to have a wind turbine too close and that, there would be a noise associated with it. But, the article suggests that it might still be an uphill battle if more people were to sue because, every situation is different and you kind of have to prove it every single time.
Well, I wish they could block off pieces of land that didn't have people on them. Because I wouldn't want to live next to them. Like I see them and I think they're wonderful. I think it's humankind reaching towards great things when I see them. That's what hits me. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to live next door to one. I would be sad if like a cell tower went up next to me now, and I think it will one day. But I wouldn't want a wind turbine either. So I feel empathy towards those people, and I certainly hope that it's not making them sick. But I also know that there are advances in wind turbines, that they are continually improving them and making them quieter and mitigating some things. So.
No, and apparently they did, after this issue happened, they did change the lights that were on the turbines to maybe something that was a little less obtrusive.
Stanford University has studied various countries and what it would take to get to 100% clean energy by 2050 with zero emissions. And I thought this was interesting. They've looked at, I think, 150 countries or so, including Canada and the United States. And Canada's a bit tricky because we're a cold climate, so I thought I would highlight that. The main results of transitioning Canada to 100% wind, water, and solar. That's just existing technologies. It's not nuclear. It's not hydrogen or anything like that. It's what we have right now. So we know that it works. It would keep the grid stable 100% of the time. This is helped by the fact that during cold storms, winds are stronger and solar are complementary in nature. This is true for everywhere. And in Canada, it would save 3,800 lives from air pollution per year in 2050. 3,800, which is pretty significant, but what I'm going to tell you about India in a second will blow your pants right off. So almost 1 billion tons of CO2 reduced. We would use 62% less energy. I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty of how they do this, but I'm just telling you what the results are. It would reduce our annual energy costs by nearly 70%, 69.1%. So yeah, we have to invest now to transition, but energy in the future is going to be so cheap. People don't realize that. They think because it's expensive to transition that it's always going to be expensive. No, it's going to actually be really cheap. And it's going to get cheaper and cheaper as we go along. Every decade, in the next 3 decades, it's going to get next to nothing. Especially in the 2030s, wind and solar will be very, very cheap, and batteries as well. So, $645 billion is the cost up front for that to happen. 0.01% of Canada's land for a footprint of this. And this is an issue that we talk about a lot in Canada, is jobs. So will we lose a whole bunch of energy jobs from the oil sector? Yes. Will we have 275,000 more jobs than we had net? Yes. It'll give us 275,000 more jobs, long-term, full-time jobs, which is great. Now, India same deal. Keeps the grid 100% stable. Right now, not. Get this, Brian. The same transition in India would save 1.44 million lives per year in 2050.
That's a lot.
That's incredible. Put that on a poster and plaster it around India and see if people get on board on this. What was it in Canada? It was 3,800. In India, same thing. 1.44 million lives saved from air pollution per year in 2050 when they got to zero. 6,400 million tons reduced. This is keeping into account that India's energy demands are increasing with population and middle class and economies taking off. Their annual energy costs would be reduced by 59.2%. But it would cost $6.4 trillion up front. I don't know what you can do for costs of lives or how much that costs on healthcare. But a lot of these things, and keep in mind, this is just wind, water, and solar. And this is heating and doing everything like that. There's no H2 storage or anything like that. 4.3 million net gain in jobs, 4.3 million more long-term gains in jobs. If everybody listened to the Clean Energy Show in government, they'd be a lot smarter and we would be moving faster. Because if you knew the facts, the basic facts of this stuff, you would understand why aren't we doing it.
All right. Well, tell your friends. Listen to the Clean Energy Show to save the planet.
Canadian National, one of the two railways in Canada, I thought this was interesting, is buying a battery electric freight locomotive from Wabtec to support sustainability goals. I've often asked you on the show when we talk about this stuff is, can trains become battery electric? And I guess they can because they're buying one and testing it out. So they're going to have lots of tons of towing capacity, 22.5 tons, and the energy is from 20,000 lithium-ion battery cells. That's 2.4 megawatt hours of storage, and it can go 75 miles per hour, 120 kilometers an hour, and travel 350 miles or 560 kilometers. Brian, I had a CN train when I was a kid on my railroad track. They don't have those anymore in model trains. It ran on electricity. Not battery power, but electricity.
Yeah, I guess that's right, yeah.
Yeah, I miss my train sets. I always thought when I had kids that I would have train sets again, but no, they don't even exist. You can buy them for millions of dollars from specialty places, but I guess video games are more interesting. Let's get to some feedback. James Siddell writes, another great show this week, guys. Keep up with the good work. I enjoy listening. I'm in Britain. Thank you, James Siddell. We always like to hear from our listeners. Joe from District Brewing here in our town where we are sent us this. A man announces he will quit drinking by 2050. This is a dummy's guide to COP26. A Sydney man has set ambitious targets to phase out his alcohol consumption within the next 29 years as part of an impressive plan to improve his health. The program will see Greg Taylor, 73, continue to drink as normal for the foreseeable future before reducing consumption in 2049 when he turns 101. So this is a fable, Brian, that compares what we're doing with the climate to what this man would be doing with drinking alcohol, and is absurd that anything is going to be fixed and that he's even going to be around when he's 101.
No, I saw that on Twitter and I had a huge laugh. That was great.
We, the Clean Energy Show, love to hear from you, the listener of the Clean Energy Show. And you can reach us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. That is our email account. That's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We are on Twitter and TikTok at Clean Energy Pod. That's Clean Energy Pod.
Okay, so just some quick roundup here of the latest in Tesla news. There was tons going on this week, as there always seems to be with Tesla. Elon Musk was tweeting about selling 10% of his Tesla stock to pay a bunch of taxes, and he put up a Twitter poll. People were supposed to vote on whether he should sell 10% of his shares. People voted yes. I don't know. I was slightly confused by the whole thing because he's going to have to pay these taxes anyway. He has a bunch of shares options coming due that, he's going to have to pay 10 or 12 billion in taxes kind of no matter what. So I was a little confused as to why he put it to a Twitter poll, but it was certainly entertaining for, the time that it was up there. But the stock took a nosedive this morning on news of that, but then, recovered a bit. It's down 2 or 3%, which is not a big deal. But, once those shares go on the market, it will see, a slight dip probably in the stock price. But I don't know.
I think he's just being wacky.
Yeah. He's mostly just being wacky.
Okay. So Pepsi says that they're getting Tesla semis this year. But how is that possible? Because they said they're delayed until 2023 or something. Yeah,
well, we'll get some more confirmation of this. This story just came out, but the head of Pepsi says that they're getting some Tesla semis before the end of the year. So either they are, and it's a bit of a sort of a test pilot program, or maybe he misspoke and they're coming at the end of next year. I don't know, but I'm always excited to hear about the Tesla semi news because that's been long delayed. So I'm just looking forward to seeing some electric semis because that's, a whole nother revolution in electric transport we're all waiting for.
Yes. Some people are speculating that it's perhaps pre-production models because they're starting to make pre-production models in California at Fremont. So maybe that's the case, and they'll just test them, have them permanently to test. I know they've had them maybe temporarily to test. So
and those need the new 4680 battery cells, but it sounds like they are making a decent number of those in California, so probably enough for a few semis if they're going to do it.
Tesla is moving the driver profiles to the cloud. How does that work?
Yeah, so right now I have a driver profile in my car. So when I get in, I tap the screen and I tap Brian, and it remembers all the settings for the car for me that I prefer. And but those are going to go into the cloud. So if I end up driving another Tesla, either someone else's that I'm borrowing or from maybe Hertz Rent-A-Car, it's going to recognize me. I think just maybe from having my phone with me. And these profiles are going to be portable and movable to any Tesla. So that's a lot of fun.
Now, let's say there was a Tesla driving network where you could rent out your car. You work 9 to 5, it takes you to work, drops you off, and the car is a taxi all day for you and earns you money. The person who's a customer of that could have their own profile.
If there was some
for temperature or music or whatever.
Some type of rental service where you were regularly using different, and there's car sharing services, those exist. So if there's a car sharing service out there that has some Teslas in their network, then same thing.
So I got into a heated discussion with my son about robo-taxis because I don't know how it came up. It came up and I said, well, robo-taxis are going to take over and it's inevitable. And he said, are you sure? How do you know that it's inevitable? So I said, because it's happening now. You can pay for a robo-taxi now from Waymo and GM service in San Francisco, I think, and actually drive in a driverless vehicle. Actually, it's just Waymo right now where there's not a safety driver standing by. But so I sent him a video and said, look at 20 seconds of this and get back to me if you don't believe me, because how can you say something's not coming if it's here? It's not ubiquitous. It's not everywhere. But if it works there, and if you know how computers improve and the sensors, computer sensors, the sensors that they'll be using improve every year in price and functionality, how can you not think that A is not going to get to B?
So did you convince him?
I don't know. He went back to his college town where he was just visiting for the weekend. But anyway, I will get back to you on the show. Stay tuned for future episodes where I will update you.
No, and there was more news about Tesla in Canada, kind of Canada heavy with news this week, but there's going to be a Tesla manufacturing plant in Markham, Ontario, that's going to build the machines that will make batteries for Tesla, presumably the 4680 battery cells that are going into production soon. They put out a nice little video. There's already apparently 1,200 employees of Tesla Canada, and they've already started making some of these battery making machines. But there was kind of an official announcement from the mayor of Markham, Ontario, that a more official announcement of a Tesla presence there. And that's a big deal.
And there's also late breaking news that about opening up shop in Quebec. Markham is Ontario. Quebec is next door, the largely French-speaking province. And they're talking, it sounds like they could have a really big battery manufacturing plant, making use of the many minerals that Quebec has for making those batteries. And that could be just the latest gigafactory for batteries.
Yeah.
That open daily, by the way.
It's still kind of an early rumor, but yeah, a possible multi-billion-dollar battery production facility in Quebec, Canada. Quebec also has clean electricity. They're all hydropower for their electricity, so that helps make the batteries cleaner. But also, as I mentioned before on the show, Hydro-Quebec, they own a lot of patents. I mean, this wouldn't be directly related to this issue, but Hydro-Quebec, the utility there, owns a lot of patents to do with lithium-ion batteries, which I just think is kind of interesting.
Oil ban.
Yes, the government of Belgium's Flemish region is preparing to introduce legislation to ban the sale of new non-EV vehicles by 2027. Good date. I like the date. 8 years before the European Union's ICE phase-out date. Flanders will table a law outlining a ban on the sale of new gas-burning vehicles in 2027. The country's used vehicle market will be affected. You won't be able to buy a used vehicle by 2030. That's interesting.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. That's
going to be a shock to the system. That means, you know what that means? It means you cannot buy a gas vehicle today because you're stupid. Unless you crash it, you won't be able to sell it. The value is a stranded asset. In 2030, you won't be able to sell it. Wow. So that's, I mean, you could leave it, maybe you could take it outside the Flanders region to sell it. I don't know, but that is a pretty aggressive local. I mean, Barack Obama today, when he addressed COP26, said that in spite of the Trump administration abandoning Paris targets, the country's done well. And it's because of local governments. It's because of state and local governments keeping up the fight. And I wish our local government here in the city we live in would do something. They're starting to think about it. So we'll see how that goes, Brian. Yes, the lightning round where we breeze through the headlines every week and clean up what we've left behind. Brian, I just mentioned that Tesla's in talks with the Quebec government, a multi-billion-dollar investment into battery production. So we'll look at that next week, and hopefully there'll be more news. A 13-year-old girl from Moose Jaw, the little city next door to us, has petitioned Girl Guides of Canada to stop using palm oil in cookies. Palm oil bad. Brian Stockton.
Yeah, we're going to have to start another oil ban segment that's a palm oil ban.
Yes, way to go, young girl in Moose Jaw. I'm always impressed when people that age, because it's their future. We are burning the Amazon to make more palm trees and more palm oil, so palm oil bad. Only 60% of the U.S. electric vehicle DC fast charging ports are greater than 50 kilowatts. What we want is for that to be approaching 150 kilowatts, right?
Yeah, 150 should be the new minimum for sure.
Used Nissan Leaf batteries are already making money as power brokers. B2U Storage Solutions has turned about 160 used Nissan Leaf battery packs into energy storage, an array that supports 1 megawatt solar farm in Lancaster, California, and the company sells that energy for as much as 200 megawatts or $200 per megawatt hour, which is probably peak pricing that the grid demands at certain times. And to charge the battery only costs $25. Cha-ching.
Yeah. So as we've talked about before on the show, a battery in your car has a pretty good useful life, 10 years, 15 years, something like that. And then you lose capacity, but then that capacity, that battery can then go into home storage where maybe it doesn't need as much capacity and run there for another 10 years and then eventually be recycled. So it's a super, people do worry about the environmental cost and impact of all these batteries, but it's ultimately a good news story in terms of their life cycle.
People assume that electric cars last for 5 years and they throw them in the landfill. Well, they'll probably last for up to 20 years soon.
Yeah.
And the batteries will then either go to like a teenager to drive that car for, a small range around town, or it can go into storing energy for another 10, 20 years until it has no useful energy, and then it's recycled. And a lot of it will be recycled, almost, 95% now, maybe even higher. Wright Electric announces that the Wright Spirit 100-seat electric aircraft it is envisioned to use for 1-hour flights, which is short-haul, flights, but that's 100 seats. A lot of planes are doing short-haul flights like that. It builds on the BAE 146 platform, 100-passenger 4-engine aircraft, and it is known for operation of noise-sensitive airports where they don't want a lot of noise. So that's interesting. We're starting to see that take off, and we do expect to see short-haul flights electrified in the not-too-distant future. Australia has about 10 million households, Brian Stockton, and they are now already have achieved 30% coverage with solar. It's just crazy. I know Australia is a good place to have solar. I know their grid is, needs this. It's a problematic grid, but wow.
Yeah, and they fixed the regulation in terms of putting them up. So we were talking about that earlier with Tony Seba. We've got to open up the grid and just make it easier for people to put power on the grid, and they've done that in Australia.
So that's 3 million households and small businesses now have solar, and it's because they've taken away the soft costs. And you reduce those soft costs in the regulation, it can happen. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Perhaps you've heard that designates $65 billion for upgrades to the nation's electric grid, and then $7.5 billion for the deployment of EV charging stations. Good thing, yes?
Yeah, so there's still other parts of the bill to come. So the EV subsidy that they've been talking about and we've been talking about is not there yet. But in the package that has so far been passed, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in terms of the infrastructure and EV charging stations. And so that's good news for the rollout of more chargers in the U.S.
Yeah, that'll triple the number of chargers in the U.S. Finally this week, the U.S.'s third largest utility will shut down 55% of its coal fleet by 2030. Brian, I always like to leave on a positive note. I apologize to everyone for such a long show. I had to get some personal things off my chest. This seemed like the perfect place to do it. You can also leave us a SpeakPipe message at speakpipe.com/Clean Energy Show. We hope to hear from you, and consider rating and reviewing us on iTunes, and we'll read it here on the show one of these days. We'll see you next week.
James, you'll get my therapy bill, and I'll see you next week.
Bye for now.